look a little bit. Let's see. Oh my goodness. It's doing crazy stuff here. Okay, I think we're ready now. So after this first test, there were several students that were saying that, some people were like, I did all right, but I would like to know how I could do better on some tests. And so I'm going to give you some strategies today that are actually going to be something that are going to be beneficial for not only this math class, but you can use them in other classes as well. And specifically for STEM classes, and most of you, since you're taking Math 1010, it means you're probably a STEM major. So you have science and or maybe it's business or something like that you're going to be doing. So science, technology, those kind of classes you might have ahead of you. And so some of those classes can be intimidating as you're taking them. And so this is hopefully going to be something that you can use and will benefit you. And this is just adapted from a lady named Sandra McGuire, and she came and spoke to us about metacognition, and I've shared it with a lot of my students, and they have done really well because of it. And I just want you to take a look at, let's see here. Take a look at these scores that are on here. So the scores that are in black are the scores that these students achieved before they started implementing the strategies that I'm going to be talking to you about today. And the ones that are in red are their scores that they earned after they started implementing these strategies. So if you take a look at just a few of these, like, Travis, he implemented these in a psychology class, and he started off with a 47, 52, and he probably didn't think it was very possible for him to pass the class when he, started off with such low grades. But you can see in the end, he was still able to get a final grade of B, but that was because his other, scores definitely went up as he was going into these last two tests. And so, I find it really interesting that students, and for whatever reason, some students maybe were doing things like not memorizing the formulas that they needed to memorize. Some of them could have been trying to use like outside sources that kind of do the homework for you. And so it makes it so you don't really have to think about it. There's so many apps out there that students think, oh, this is going to help me get through the class because it will just do the work for me. But then in the end, it ends up hindering them and they score poorly on the test because they don't know the material, or they don't know how to retrieve that material from where they stored it in their brain if they did learn it at one point. And so there's just a few things like that. So these students used metacognition, and we'll talk about a little bit more about what that means in a bit. But for right now, I want you to understand that they studied to learn, not just to make the grade. Right? So, when you're thinking about that, right, studying to learn, not just to make the grade. If you're studying just to make the grade, oftentimes you're not learning things at a level where you'll actually remember it. But if you're studying to learn, you'll also make the grade that you want to be able to get to. So it's kind of a mind, shift and making sure that you do those things. So I want you to get the most out of homework. And I want to start here because homework is supposed to be the practice that you're using in order to do well on exams and tests. But some students don't treat it that way. They think, oh, it doesn't matter if I do my homework or, whatever. it's not worth a big part of my grade, but it's the practice that you need in order to get there. And it's the way that you are, doing your homework and studying that is actually going to make the difference. So first of all, make sure that you're starting them early, right? I mean, I have my classes, the homework, technically isn't due until like the day of the quiz. You have until then, but I give you due dates along the way because I want you to keep up with what, we've been talking about, some of you are in my online class and some of you are in my remote class. And so those in the online class, you don't have a class to come to, but you have a schedule to keep to. So make sure that you're, not putting off your homework. And this is one of the biggest things and the single most important mistakes that I see that students make in math class, and they score less on their exam than they're capable of, and most of it is because they're not getting out of the homework what they could, and I don't know, like how many of you, I'll include myself in this as well, when, I was a student when I was going to college and stuff. And when I was doing the homework and I'd read the question, and then, if I didn't know how to do it, I'd immediately, flip back to my notes or to the book or whatever and find a problem like that. Can any of you relate to that? Have any of you done that before? Yeah.
Totally do that.
And, and I did it too, because I thought, well, that's going to be the best way for me to learn, right? And make sure that I am understanding the material. But I later learned that actually was hindering me in a way, because it wasn't helping my brain to be able to figure out how to do things for the test. So meaning, if you're not able to have example problems on the test, then you shouldn't, look at those when you're doing your homework and stuff. And you should try and work them by yourself. Don't just immediately flip back, but just make sure that you're, giving your brain a chance to try and retrieve that information, because then it's going to learn how to retrieve that information better. And so when you're doing that, like when you're flipping back to that example, right? Who is really doing the problem? Are you doing the problem? Or is the example kind of doing it for you? Do you see what I'm saying? How sometimes it's, it's not your brain really thinking through it. You're just looking at, oh, well, I do this step and this step and this step. And like I said, I was guilty of it too. I'm not saying because that's the way I thought would be best for me to learn. And so I think a lot of students think that. And, but it wasn't helping me do better on tests, I found. And so.
Also, you learn by making mistakes.
You do. I am so glad you said that. Because, think about, mistakes that you have made, and it doesn't even have to be just in, math, but since we're talking about math, we can kind of go there a little bit more. But think about when you've made a mistake, and I try and give you guys, opportunities to be able to make mistakes where things are not worth as much, as many points, so that when you're, going into your test and stuff like that, hopefully, by then your brain was like, oh, wait a minute, I made that mistake before, right? And actually, I don't think I've shared this with you guys yet this semester, but there's actually an acronym that some people say that math stands for, right? And that's mistakes allow thinking to happen, right? So mistakes are important because it really makes you think about the problem that you're working on and how you could work on it differently, right? Thank you for saying that. I really appreciate it, because mistakes are super important in our learning process. Okay, and I said this already before, but try and not go immediately to those helps. Whether it's like, don't go immediately back to your video, to your notes, like try and let your brain really, think through it. Obviously, if you're like so stuck that you're like, I don't even know where to start, that's okay. Then you should go back through like all of your notes for that section, right? Not just go step by step. Okay, I did this, now I'll do this. I did this, now I'll do this, right? Look through the whole example first, then put it aside, and then try and work a problem through again and see if you can do it without looking at it. Because really, you should keep doing the homework problems to the point of where you don't have to look at anything. If you have to keep looking back at stuff, then that means you're not ready to be tested on that, right? And so you need to give your brain more practice to retrieve that information. And that's really what happens is a lot of people think, oh, I'm just bad at math, or I just, and a lot of people have math anxiety, they have test anxiety, and I know it is a real thing. When I was in graduate school, I did a lot of research on math anxiety and test anxiety, and, and it is a real thing. And so you've got to, make sure that you're helping yourself not to be so anxious on the test. And one of those things is practicing this retrieval. If you're practicing this way, your brain will be used to it and it will be able to do these problems a lot easier. Okay. All right, so I have a couple of questions here that I want to ask you, right? And I'd like somebody to, a few of you at least, unmute yourself and tell me what is the difference, if any, between studying math and learning math? So if you don't think there's a difference, tell me why. Or if you do think there's a difference, tell me why. I have a few of you volunteer to kind of tell us about that.
I think learning math means like you're able to teach somebody how to do it.
Oh, I like that. Yeah, where studying math would be what then?
Just getting by.
Okay, just getting by. Awesome. Thanks, David. That's great. What else?
Learning, I think, is more so retaining the information that you're learning instead of just studying it and doing the act. You're actually retaining that.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. I mean, because have you guys ever studied something that you didn't learn? You know what I mean? Like, so you studied something,
Yeah, to me, like studying is like the act of, trying to learn it. But just because you're studying doesn't mean you actually learn it. To learn something means you gain the knowledge and the understanding on your own.
Yeah. So I don't know how many times, like when I was, taking classes, I was reading through a textbook and I felt like I was studying it, but then my mind would wander, right? And then I wasn't really thinking too much about what was being said. And I was like, oh man, now I got to go back and reread what that page was saying, because I knew that even though I was reading the words, I wasn't learning it, right? It wasn't sticking with me. So I needed to go back and do that. All right, awesome. Thank you guys for sharing those. And then I want everybody to answer this in the chat, okay? So don't press enter yet, but just put either A or B into the chat message, right? So which test do you think you would work harder to earn an A on the test? So that would be if you think A is what you do work harder for, then select A. If you think to teach the material to the class, you would work harder, then select B. All right, so go ahead and put those into the chat and then hit enter. Wow. Okay, wow, everybody so far that answered, okay. Oh, no, one person said, I think it would be the same if I can teach it, okay. And a few people said, A, right? If I can teach it, I will earn an A. I like that, right? But why did most of you say B? Somebody just unmute yourself and tell me, why do you think you would work harder if I asked you, if I said, okay, tomorrow I want you to teach about, adding and subtracting fractions?
I think because if you're trying to help someone understand...
Can you talk a little bit louder? Sorry, I can't hardly hear you.
It might not be close. Can you hear me?
Yeah, there we go.
Okay. I think if you're trying to help someone else understand it and like someone else learn the subject, you have more motivation to fully learn it yourself because you don't want to be teaching them the wrong thing.
Right, I agree with that. I think that's really important. Yeah. What else? What else are you guys thinking? Okay, and let's see. So Austin said you're not failing only yourself, you're failing a bunch of people, and that you're like, oh, I don't want to do that, right? And then Corinna said that she would work harder to understand the logic behind it and not just the steps. Okay, I like that. I think you guys are onto something really good there, thinking about, why, if you're trying to teach the material. And that's like when we're in class, or sometimes even during, like work, when I'm having you do some work together in groups and stuff, that's the reason behind it, because then you get that opportunity to teach somebody else, right? Teach that material. All right, so how can you ace your course, right? So, like I said, this can apply to more than just math, right? But how can we do this? Well, you've got to stay in learn mode, not study mode, right? Where you're actually like thinking to yourself, do I know this material? Could I teach it to somebody else, right? And then just make sure that you're studying as if you had to teach it to somebody else, okay? And in fact, I tell my students, that it is always good. Like if you're struggling with some concept and you're like, I really want to get it down, then I say, try and teach it to somebody else. And, it doesn't even have to be like a human, right? You could teach it to your dog. You could teach it to a stuffed animal. You could teach it to a baby, because it's not the actual, like who you're teaching it to, but saying the words out loud helps you to understand, do I know this well, or where am I getting stuck? It's easy to when you're thinking things in your mind. Think about this. Like when you're like, you think, oh, I understand how to do that. And then it's on the quiz and you're like, oh, wait a minute. I thought I understood how to do it, but now I don't remember for sure how to do that. Right? But if you take the time and actually say it out loud, that is going to stick into your brain so much longer, and it helps you to see, what do I know? What do I still need more help understanding? And then you can jot down questions that you have, bring them to class, bring them to my study hours, right? So that I can help you with that, right? Awesome. And I there's some great things being said in the chat, so make sure you're watching there. I love what you guys are saying. I think you can teach it. That means you understand it. If you're taking a test, you're not only testing a set of problems in a contained setting. Studying math, just memorize facts and attend school. Learning is knowledge by studying. I like that, right? Knowledge by studying, right? Awesome. Thank you so much. Love your participation. All right, so why is it important to stay in learn mode for this class? And some of you might already be, thinking about that and, understand why some things are, right? But remember that math is cumulative. And so like everything, those of you that have started in on chapter 5 or module 5 now, you'll probably see everything that we learned about in module 4 is being used in module 5, right? So if you didn't understand the stuff there, that's going to make the stuff here harder to do, right? So it's cumulative. It builds on itself, right? Also, the problems get more involved, right? As the level of the math course increases. You want to make sure that you're able to apply what you're learning, right? So a lot of students are like, oh, I don't like doing story problems, or I don't like doing problems that look different than the ones that were the examples, but that's helping your brain apply what you have learned. And that's going to help you stay in this learn mode rather than just study mode. Okay? And I'm sure some of you have noticed, especially those that are just, you know, haven't been out of high school too long, you notice that, you know, college moves a lot quicker than high school does. And we are on this summer semester and it's moving even quicker. And so it's really important that you stay in this learn mode because you're going to need all of this stuff for your next math class and other, you know, science classes and stuff that you do too. Right? So not just for this. So, all right. So I'm going to, you know, help you understand how you can use metacognition to become an expert learner. Right? Now, what is metacognition? Let's define it here. It's the ability to think about thinking. Right? So you're actually, you know, like you are actually thinking about what you're thinking. You're not just, you know, I mean, it's kind of weird, you know, when people are like, what do you mean? But that's kind of asking like these why and what if questions if you're thinking about what you're actually doing, right? It's also being aware of yourself as a problem solver, okay? And then also always, you know, monitoring yourself and asking yourself, am I understanding this material, right? Asking yourself that all the time, not just, can I do it? Can I move from step to step? Right? But do I understand what's going on? Because that's where things are going to come together and it's going to stick in your brain longer. If you feel like it's just all, you know, math is just all these things that you're memorizing, right? Then no wonder, you know, you don't like it very much or that it's hard, you know, because math isn't meant to be like memorize everything. It's meant to, you know, like, this is how you do something. Now, how do I apply it to what I'm doing now? Okay. And make sure you're judging your level of learning. Some students, you know, think that, oh, I understand this really well. And in fact, I've had students tell me that before where they're like, I understood the material really well, but, you know, I bombed the test. And they didn't say that, you know, they had any issues with anxiety or anything like that. They're just like, I think I should have done better on the test. And so being able to, you know, actually figure out where you're at, you should be able to be, you know, going into a test or right after you take it, before you get your score, be able to say, oh, I think I, you know, probably got a B on this. Not like, you know, think you got an A and you actually got a D or something like that, right? That's not accurately judging where you're at. So we want to help you learn how to do that. Okay. So in this next little exercise, right, I want you to count the vowels. So I'm considering vowels to be A, E, I, O, and U. Okay, so we're not including Y in there, just A, E, I, O, and U. And I want you to count all the vowels in the words on the next slide. And I'm going to give you 45 seconds to do this. All right, so I'll give you 45 seconds. To do this. So here we go. Okay, go ahead. Time is start. Count all the vowels. Okay, and stop. Okay, so now, how many words or phrases do you remember? Oh no! Type something in there. How many do you think you remember? All right, some people are like, well, maybe one or none. Okay, so why? Why didn't you remember words or phrases? You were just looking at all of those words and phrases. So why didn't you remember any of them? Okay, so you were focusing on the vowels, right? I like that. You're concentrating too much on the vowels. You're concentrating on just one component. So you weren't seeing the bigger picture, right? And how many times do we do that in math, right? We, think about something and we get really hyper-focused on it and we don't think about how does this fit in to the bigger picture? How do I apply this to something else, right? So I want you to look at the words again, okay? And I'm going to give you a few seconds here. And I want you to, figure out they're arranged in a certain way, right? So I want you to see, let me give you just a few seconds to see. And when somebody knows how they're being arranged, you kind of see the pattern that's happening there, then go ahead and type it into the chat. Okay, so some people are saying numerically, right? All right, so if it's, if there's a pattern that you can follow, right, and see that pattern, I'm now going to only give you 15 seconds. And I want you to look at these words and phrases again, and let's see how many of them you could name now. Okay, so now how many words or phrases can you remember? Let's see, let's have some people either say it out loud. Like, so what was the first one? Let's just kind of go through them. Either say it out loud or type it in.
Dollar bill.
Dollar bill, then what?
Dice.
Dice, right, for 2. What did 3 represent? Tricycle, you said. How about 4?
Octopus.
4-leaf clover. How about 5? Hand. Right. How about 6? 6-pack. Good. Okay, how about 7?
7-Up.
7-Up. How about 8?
Octopus.
Yep, octopus, because octopus has 8 legs, right? 9?
Cat lives.
Cat lives, right? Because cats have 9 lives. How about 10? Remember that one? That one was bowling pins. Yep, the bowling. Okay, what about 11?
Football team.
Yeah, because there's 11 players on a football team. How about 12?
Dozen?
Yep, dozen eggs.
Dozen eggs.
Yep. Okay, and what was 13?
Unlucky Friday.
What was that? And yeah, Unlucky Friday. Yep. Okay, 14? Valentine's Day. And 15?
Quarter hour.
Yeah, quarter hour, because there's 15 minutes and a quarter of an hour, right? So do you see how, like, maybe not, maybe you weren't able to remember all of those as we went through them, but you at least had a way to try and remember them, right? You're like, okay, well, I know that goes with number 1, number 2. Okay, what could go with number 4? What could go with number 10? Right? So your brain is like thinking about things. It's thinking about a bigger picture. It's not just focusing in. But even though, so now you know all those words and phrases. If you knew all those words and phrases, could you go back and be able to say how many vowels there are? Figure that out in your head? That makes sense what I'm saying? So having that bigger picture, you can also, be able to focus in on certain parts when you need to. But if you only focus in on those certain parts, when you try and expand it out, that's harder to do, okay? So let me see. I want to know also, because some of you are like, well, how many vowels were there, right? You want to know for sure. So go ahead, type your answer in, but don't hit enter quite yet. What did you guys, can you remember? Maybe a little bit. How many vowels did you find? Some people are always curious about this. Okay, hit enter. Let me see what you guys have. Okay. Good. Yep, and 50 was the correct answer. So good job on that. All right, sometimes it was, you know, kind of hard to say. And like I said, I tried to make very clear that the Y's weren't included, because sometimes people include the Y's on that counting and stuff. But yeah, so there were 50 of them on that page, right? All right, so let's keep moving on, but think about that, like focusing on that bigger picture rather than, you know, staying hyper-focused on something there, okay? All right, so how can you turn yourself into these efficient expert learners, right? So a couple of things, right? You need to ask yourself why and what if questions, right? So don't just focus on the how. How is important sometimes, but in math class specifically, like focus on, well, I wonder why that's happening. I wonder if the, you know, if the answer was this instead, or I wonder if those, you know, lines are parallel, what that would do, or I wonder if, you know, like just, so think about all these different things. Okay, give mini lectures on concepts. So that's what I was talking about. Just, you know, if you have a concept that you're struggling with or want to make sure that you have down really well, like try it out on, you know, your dog, a stuffed animal, your kid, you know, significant other, whoever. It doesn't matter who it is. It's that, you know, and you can just even do it. I mean, some people are like, I sometimes even just do it in the bathroom in front of the mirror, right? Just explaining something to make sure that you have it down really well. Or just, you know, when you have time in class to be able to, in groups, small groups, to be able to explain it. That's also great, right? So always test your understanding, right, by verbalizing or writing about concepts. So remember, you need to practice retrieval of information. That isn't something that just comes. It's something that your brain has to learn how to do. Like think about when you have a computer, right, and you've saved a computer or a file on your computer, and then at some point, right, weeks later, as you go and try and find it, and you're like, I can't find it. I don't know where it is. Because for some reason, you stored it in a weird place that you didn't mean to store it in, and so you couldn't find it, right? The same thing sometimes happens with our brain, where we're like, I know I learned that, and if it's in there, it's practicing how to retrieve it, how to get it out. And that happens by practicing your homework the same way you would a test, right? Trying to not look back at things, right? But treat it like a test so you can practice that retrieval, right? And then you want to move your activities. We're going to talk about Bloom's taxonomy next and how that helps you to be able to do better, okay? And verbal out loud as you think through a problem. I mean, you know, if you're just working on your work, you know, all alone and, you know, or even if you're not alone, sometimes just saying some of the things out loud as you're working through it can really help solidify it in your mind. Okay? So don't worry about that. You know, like people think, oh, I don't want to look like I'm crazy and talking to myself, but that's okay, right? I mean, no judgment. I don't know how many times I've had to do that with a problem. It's just like verbalize, talk it through, right? All right, so here's Bloom's taxonomy, and those that, you know, have taken any kind of education class or anything like that, learn about Bloom's taxonomy, right? And Bloom's taxonomy is something that I think should be taught to everybody, not just people that are learning to become teachers, because you want to be able to learn to teach yourself things, right? And if you're trying to teach yourself something, that's going to be really important, to know this Bloom's taxonomy. So as you're going, so the lower level, right, is just kind of the memorization stuff, remembering and understanding, where the 4 higher things on this little triangle or this pyramid of sorts, right, are the more meaningful learning, right? So it happens up here. And that's where your brain makes connections and where you can actually, figure out how things are working together. And so with remembering, right, you need to, it's like, can you recall the information, right? So can you define something? If you memorize like your multiplication facts or something like that, right? Or can you list off certain, qualities of, whatever. So recalling, right, is that basic level, right? The understanding goes a little bit further. Well, can you explain it, right? Can you describe it in words? Could you translate like a math, like something from English into math or something like that, right? That would be the understanding level. Right? Applying is the next level. Can you use the information in a new way? Right? So maybe, on this, you can demonstrate, a different way to solve a problem. So you're like, okay, I could do it this way, or I could graph it, and that would be another way that I would be able to solve this problem, right? Or, just taking some kind of strategy that you have learned and applying it to a different situation, right? And analyzing is the next one up. Can you distinguish between different parts, right? So like, can you tell the difference between linear and nonlinear functions, right? What was that?
Ready, out.
Oh, maybe Brian's just, all right. So how like an equation is different than an expression, right? So being able to compare and contrast things is where the analyzing comes in, right? Evaluating, can you justify your solution? So maybe, I say, I want you to be able to work through the problem, but then justify it to your classmate, like, explain to them why it's working, not just how to do it, but why your solution is the correct solution, right? And how you came up with that would be evaluating it. And then creating, can you create a new product? So maybe if, you're doing, we're doing problems with, factoring or something like that, and you're like, can I create a problem to be factored, right? I'm creating something. And that takes a different skill set in your mind to create something than it does to just remember something, right? Also projects and stuff like that are up here in this creating area, right? So as we go up on this, we're getting deeper learning. So that's why Bloom's taxonomy is a really, important thing to know and help you understand. So, but yeah, I love reading you guys' comments. Keep commenting. That's great. All right. So I want you to think about back in high school, right? At what level of Bloom's taxonomy did you have to operate to make A's or B's? So would it be, and I want you to put these into the chat, right? So is it, like 1 and 2? Do you, like up to 5? Like where were you at on this Bloom's taxonomy? So just use the numbers. What level did you have to operate to make A's or B's in high school? Okay, so most people are saying 1, 2. So it's been too long. I'm not sure. I totally get that. Maybe up to 3, right? Okay, so I think a lot of students kind of agree that in high school, they tend to not do a lot of the 4, 5, and 6. Some classes do. I'm not saying all classes don't, but most classes focus down here in the 1, 2, and 3 range, right? But what about in college so far? What's been your experience? Where do you have to be able to operate in college to make A's? Yeah, I agree. Kind of up through 5. I mean, there's going to be some classes where you're going to be doing creating, like in this, class, we're doing that project. And so that's kind of helping you create something. But yeah, I mean, it's much higher level of, where you have to be on Bloom's to be able to do this. So understanding that we're trying to help you increase that knowledge and really, be able to enrich your learning in college is what we're aiming to do here. Okay. So how do you move yourself higher on Bloom's taxonomy? Because some people are like, I don't know, I feel like I'm still just down there in the memorizing zone, and I just try and memorize everything for math, and that hasn't helped me do well on the test. So what can I do differently to get higher on this? Okay. And so I'm going to talk about this study cycle with intense study sessions. Okay. Now, if there's something, if you have something to take notes with and stuff right now, I would say do that. I mean, I can send this next slide out to you and stuff too, if that's easier, but I think it would help you to take some notes on some things here on this next page. Okay, so what is the study cycle, first of all? Okay. All right, so the study cycle starts with previewing. And for those of you that are in my remote class know that I say, okay, I ask you to watch the videos, take the little mini quiz before you come to class, because that helps you preview, right? Watch the videos, maybe in some classes, with your textbooks, skim over the section that you're going to be talking about, notice the bolded words, and maybe come up with questions that you have so that you can bring those to class, right? So previewing, and just spending just a few minutes previewing, it doesn't have to be that long, can really help you in most classes do better, right? And then attending class, right? So again, those of you that are in my online class don't have a class that you can come to, but I've invited you and told you you could come to my class if you would like to. I know it doesn't work for everybody, but if you can't go to class, right, because it's an online class, then maybe, make sure you're coming to study, my office hours or study sessions or anything like that, to attend everything that you can there and ask the questions that you have. And also, those of you that are in the online class and in my other, my remote class, make sure you're asking questions, whether it's in class or like pose them to me, like in a message or whatever. Ask questions. Questions are always a good thing. Okay, and then this is something that I want everybody to try, right? So review after class, right? So, and by class for the online, students, that just means your class is just, taking notes on those videos and stuff that you're doing. And so then you need to read over your notes just for a few minutes, fill in any gaps, note any questions that you might have that you want to bring to class for me to look at, okay? But make sure you just spend a little bit of time reviewing right after class as soon as possible. Okay, then here comes the study part of the study cycle, right? So look at all this stuff that we're, doing before we actually get to that studying, right? So, I want to talk about this thing called intense study sessions, right? So, and this is actually where your keyword or the little mystery phrase that you need for your extra credit is going to come in. So write this down, right? The mystery phrase that you need is study cycle and intense study sessions, right? So the study cycle and intense study sessions is the phrase that I want you to know and that it'll be asked for. Okay. And And so that's the next thing that we're going to talk about, is this intense study sessions. Okay, what do I mean by that? Well, intense study sessions have, so there's somebody said, can I write it? So it's just the study cycle, that's just at the top of this slide, and then intense study sessions right there. Okay, so those two things. All right. So setting a goal, right? So you're just going to set a goal of what you're going to do. And some people are like, I don't know if I can always do this, but I guarantee you're going to do so much better if you set a little goal. And that goal could be as simple as, I'm going to complete this homework session or this section during this intense study session, right? So I'm going to complete homework 5.3 or whatever it is, right? Or it could be something like, I want to learn factoring well enough to teach it to somebody else, right? So it could either be concept-based, or it could be, like being able to complete your homework, right? But set some kind of a goal, right? And decide what you're going to accomplish there. Then you're going to study intensely, right? With focus, and not have anything interrupt you during that time. And I know sometimes that's hard, especially when people are at home and stuff like that. But if you can find some time, and 50 minutes is on the higher end of these study sessions. I would say closer to 30 minutes is probably better. And then get up and, take a little break and stuff. But decide how long in your goal above you're going to be spending on your study session, okay? But then start working on the material. And if you come across something that you don't know how to do, and remember, you're not just going to go back and say, okay, I'm going to look at, what step Becky did, and then I'm going to do the exact same thing on this one. Look at the next step, right? We're not going to do it that way anymore. You're going to read through the whole example, understand the big picture of the example, how it works together, and then try and work the problem again, right? So that can be part of your studying with focus. Right? And if you get, stuck with something and you're like, I really don't understand it, then it wouldn't mean, this would be a good time. Go find another video on the internet. There's so many different videos that you could look at, so if your notes aren't helping you, think about, what could I do to help me? Go to the discussion board. I really would like you guys to start using that discussion board more, because it gives you that opportunity to be able to explain things to other students, right? And to get your questions answered. So it's great for both reasons, okay? Then the third thing is you've got to reward yourself. And again, in your setting your goal, you're going to think about what kind of a reward you're going to want. And of course, these are just little goals, so it should just be some kind of a little, reward. But, taking a little break, maybe playing a game on your phone, maybe getting on social media, go get a snack, go for a walk, whatever is rewarding to you that will encourage you to complete that intense study session, right? And then make sure you set a timer, right? Don't go more than 15 minutes. It's easy to get sucked into social media. It's easy to get sucked into playing games that you forget and lose track of time, right? But it's important that your brain thinks about something else for a few minutes. And then the last step is you're going to come back and you're going to review for just 5 minutes, okay? And just review over what you studied, because that solidifies it in your brain, what you just went through after you took a little break, okay? And then the last part of the study cycle is, just assess yourself. How am I doing? Am I understanding this? Do I understand it well enough to teach it to others? Am I using strategies that are effective, or do I need to look at other things? Okay. And so I want to talk about, this is the last thing on here, but these are metacognitive strategies. And what I'm going to have you do is, we'll go through this in a quick, but I want you to pick at least 2. And again, where the extra credit assignment is on Canvas, it will ask which 2 you have picked and why you are picking those. Okay, so Always solve problems without looking at the examples, right? So you're not going to look back. Memorize everything you're told to memorize. Right? Always ask why, how, or what if questions, focusing on those why and what if. Okay? Give mini lectures, right? Spend time on the course each day. Some people are like, I can't spend time each day, but I could, like 4 days a week. Well, great, then make that your goal. But if you can, as much as you can, study every day and, do these small, intense study sessions, it's actually going to help you more, right? Use a study cycle with intense study sessions. Attend study groups, like make study groups. If you don't have like a study group, go in and, talk to people on the discussion board and say, hey, who wants to get into a study group and get ready for this next test, right? Make a study group and then get together. And then make sure you're aiming for 100% mastery, not 90%, right? Because you want to aim for the best that you can do and not just settle for, oh, well, I'm only going to name, if you only aim for 90%, you can't achieve 100%. So, all right, so remember, I would suggest that too. If you want to take a screenshot of it, or if you have your camera close by and take a picture of this, right? And I'll also put it in there as well, because, remember that our key word, right, was the study cycle with intense study sessions, or if you say and intense study sessions, either way, right? Those are very specific words that people wouldn't know unless they watched this, so that's why I'm choosing that, okay? All right, and then just some of the things that people had said, about after they changed, their habits and stuff like that, right, that they were doing so much better. And I've had students that, have said, at the end of the semester that this is one of the things that helped them the most, and not just in math, but in other classes as well, right? And so these are just little things that some students have said that really helped them, right? And helped them improve their test scores, those that improved it. All right. So I've kind of already talked about those, and then just remember, that I want you to pick those, 2 of these metacognitive strategies right now, right? And I can send out that slide also. I'll put it on where the extra credit is in the assignment so you can see what those strategies are as well there. Okay, but I want you to start thinking about those right now, because, I want you to make a commitment, right? I'm only asking you to do 2. There's a lot of them on there, and I want you to pick 2 that you haven't been doing yet. Because if you're picking ones that you're already doing, it's not going to help you improve and grow yourself more, right? And if you don't start this, like doing this within the next 48 hours, chances are you won't do it at all. Okay, and I want you to start getting ready for the next test. The next test opens a week from tomorrow. And so it would be good to use this week, try out these things, and see how it can improve your, how you do on this next exam. Okay. All right, we've got just a couple more minutes. Were there any questions and things? So remember, you guys are probably in different classes because I have a couple of things on here. So, but don't worry, I'm going to share them with you, and so you can just, find them on the assignment that I give you about the, the extra credit assignment. I'll just post those learning strategies in there so you can pick from those 2. Okay. All right. Any final thoughts? Anything that you want to share that was helpful for you on this? I would really like to know what you guys are thinking right now, because it's so hard to tell what you're thinking when it's so quiet.
I thought it was super helpful.
Oh, good. I really hope so. I've had a lot of students that have tried this and have just been so successful by doing it. So even if you're skeptical right now, I would say just give it a try and see what, will help you. And I really think you'll find it will be helpful for you. So, all right. Well, you are going to be doing a little reflection about that. So make sure that you write down some things that were, that you found interesting specifically in here, or things that you're wanting to try, or new things that you've learned. Okay. All right, guys. Thanks so much for coming, and let me know what I can do to help you. I'm here to help. Okay.